hitting bar replay and just going a little bit more slowly and kind of just analyzing it just like I would in sort of the live market. We're going to look at 3 timeframes in this instance. So starting off with the daily chart, we can see that we've got some pretty clean bearish price action with a swing lower low, lower high, lower low, failed to close above that high. So the bearish structure stayed intact because remember, we need a candle body close above the high for swing structure for it to be a swing breaker structure. So we didn't get that in this instance. It was barely just a wick break. So we didn't get a break. And then we formed that swing breaker structure to the downside to form that swing lower low. Okay, so daily chart is clearly bearish in this instance. I'm just going to draw on the last daily break structure there to the downside and then use the highlighter pen there just to denote our swing high. Okay, so yeah, in this instance, the daily chart is bearish. We've had a swing breaker structure. What do we expect after a swing breaker structure? We expect a swing pullback. Okay, now we never know when that swing pullback will start because sometimes price will break structure and it will pull back straight away. Sometimes it'll break structure and it can literally impulse for a pretty long time, just like it did over here. It fell quite, for a fair distance. Here it kind of pulled back straight away, right? Got a bit corrective. Okay, so what can we do? Again, purely just thinking about market structure, right? We're not bringing in supply, demand, or liquidity or anything like that in this moment. We're only looking at structure. What can we do to anticipate that pullback may be happening? Well, if we just looked at one time frame, the very, very first sign that we could look at, you can remember, what would it be? It would be a fractal break of structure. In this case, we would call that a change of character, right? When the fractal structure changes trend, that would be a chalk, a change of character. That's what we would look for, okay? So in this instance, as you can see, price just broke that low there, which means that this would be the fractal high in this instance, okay? So just make that a dashed line. That's what we would look for if we were looking for a bullish daily change of character as our first potential sign that that swing pullback may be kicking in, right? Now, that's when you look at one time frame. What do you think that will likely be on a lower time frame? Well, that would likely be a more significant piece of structure. That could be, say, a 4-hour swing high or maybe a 15-minute swing high, right? It's going to be a significant piece of structure on lower time frames. So if we were to use multi-time frame analysis and look on the lower time frames and then we saw price break that to the upside, it's likely the lower time frames swing structure would have shifted bullish. And that's why we call, when we look at changes of character and we're mapping it, that's why we call it fractal structure, because it's the fractal nature of the market. It's the patterns within the patterns within patterns. If you go down, what happens on one time frame will happen on another time frame, right? It's all the same. You can look at the 36-minute chart. You can look at the 3-hour chart. You can look at the 8-hour chart. You can look at the daily chart. You can look at the 3-month chart. They're all gonna, they all do the same thing. They all move essentially in the same way, right? So that's why we call that a fractal high, because on a lower time frame, that would be a swing high. So, up until you started looking at the multi-time frame analysis lessons, you were just looking at one time frame and you learned the 3 types of structure, which was swing, internal, and fractal. And that essentially almost allows you to do multi-time frame analysis without actually having to look at any of the other time frames, okay? But now you're going to be armed with the knowledge of knowing how to do that. So knowing how to look at the 3 different types of structure on just one time frame, but now also look at all of those other time frames altogether, which is what will give you a, I'm not trying to sell you here, but an extremely, extremely deep understanding of price action from that market structure standpoint, okay? Now, obviously, as you probably saw, looking at one time frame and using 3 types of structure can probably be quite confusing initially to get your head around. Now, if you're looking at multi-time frame analysis, that can also be initially quite confusing to get your head around. And if you were to combine that with the 3 types of structure, it could get maybe a bit unnecessarily complex, okay? So kind of when you're first starting out, especially looking at multi-time frame analysis, I would say for the most part, try and kind of just concentrate on the swing structure. So what I mean by that is if you're looking at, say, the daily, the 4-hour, and the M15, maybe just initially just look at the swing structure on those time frames and don't try and get too caught up and try to perfectly nail the internal of all of those time frames and so on and so forth. And you'll see why as we go through this, okay? So as I was saying, we had a daily breaker structure. We're expecting that daily swing pullback to kick in. One of the first things that we can look at, is looking to see if we get that bullish daily chalk, okay? And that still stands, right? So now if we look at, say, the lower time frame, we're gonna go down to the 4-hour chart. What we can do is we can look at the 4-hour swing structure. So if we kind of just go back over to here, right, and we can see we had this 4-hour swing pullback, and then we had that 4-hour swing high, then we shift bearish, okay? So that signals the end of that daily swing pullback, right? Because remember that was the daily strong high. Price failed to close above it, so this lower high stayed intact on the daily chart. The 4-hour chart then shifted bearish, so that's what I mean, right? The lower time frames then signaled that that swing pullback on the daily chart is now finished, and now we can look to follow the 4-hour swing structure, right? We can short to catch these lower highs to target the weak daily swing low, right? Why is it a weak daily swing low? Well, it's weak because it failed to take out the previous daily swing high, right? So this is why we can then follow the lower time frame structure to then target that low. Now, once we get that daily break of structure, what do we have to expect? We have to expect that swing pullback can kick in at any moment, but we can keep also following the lower time frame structure until it changes trend. We just have to be a bit more aggressive with our expectations because we know that larger pullback of this bigger daily swing leg could kick in at any moment, okay? And that brings us to where we are now. So if we map on our 4-hour swing structure, what have we had? We've had a 4-hour breaker structure over here. Now you can see that dashed line to the upside. That's where the daily bullish change of character would occur, right? That's the daily fractal high. Now, what is it in this instance? In this instance, it's the 4-hour swing high. Now, that is not a set rule. That is just a coincidence that, it happens more often than not. So I guess the point I'm trying to make here is when you define your structure, so when you're drawing on swing structure or when you're drawing on fractal structure or where you're drawing on internal, you define it on the time frame you are on, okay? So what I mean by that is when we're on the daily chart here, okay, that's where the fractal high is because it's mechanical. You don't draw the fractal high because of how the 4-hour chart is looking. You always draw it here. It just so happens that a lot of the times that fractal high in the daily chart may line up with where the 4-hour swing high is, okay? So it's a coincidence. It's not the rule of how you define where you draw it, okay? Because sometimes it might be just a little bit higher or just a little bit lower, right? But we know, right? This is the 4-hour swing high because that's the highest point that took out the low, okay? So I don't know if that will make sense initially to you, but hopefully with time, you'll understand what I'm trying to say here is that when you're drawing and defining and mapping your structure, you do it based on the time frame you were looking at. So each individual time frame, and then you interpret them together, okay? So in this instance, it just so happens that the fractal daily high lines up with where the 4-hour swing high is at the same point, okay? And that will happen far more often than not. Okay, so what happens now is we get the 4-hour shifting bullish, which in this case is also the daily bullish change of character, okay? So I'm just gonna put this on as the 4-hour structure for now. So at this point, when we get that bullish 4-hour breaker structure to the upside, this now becomes a strong 4-hour low, right? Why is it strong? Well, it broke the 4-hour high to the upside. So this becomes our strong 4-hour swing low. So now the 4-hour chart has shifted bullish. And now what we can do is we can look to try and catch these 4-hour swing lower highs, okay? But why did the 4-hour chart shift bullish? You have to always ask yourself, what was the purpose of the 4-hour chart shifting bullish? What if we look at the daily chart? Remember, time is power, okay? So you always want to go up a time frame and realize that this is what, the daily chart matters way more than the 4-hour chart. It's a lot more powerful. So although we can look to trade the 4-hour chart and we can look to get long and capture the 4-hour high low within here, where are we going to target? Are we going to target past this high? I would say no, right? Because although that could happen, right? Of course, price could go up here, it can do anything it wants. But our expectation is that this is a strong daily swing high, right? So price should not trade any higher than that. So if we're looking to get long on the 4-hour chart and we're looking to catch those 4-hour higher lows, we're only playing the daily swing pullback. And we understand that the more this pulls back, if we put premium and discount on as well, right? From there, especially near the EQ, the higher that goes, we know the higher the probability is that swing pullback is now finished. And that means that the 4-hour chart will then shift bearish. And that 4-hour strong low, right? It was a strong low because it took out the high. That eventually will fail because the swing pullback on the daily chart has now done its job. And then we would expect the 4-hour chart to stay bearish until it takes out that weak daily low, okay? So it's all about managing your expectations when you're trading price. We've had the bullish daily change of character, so we're expecting the swing pullback. The 4-hour chart has now shifted bullish, so we can look to trade pro 4-hour trend, but we realize that 4-hour trend probably won't last that long because it only shifted bullish to facilitate that swing pullback on the daily chart to form that daily lower high to then continue to the downside, okay? So hopefully you can start to see how we use multi-time frame analysis to really understand how far we expect price to go, okay? Because this is the daily high up here, so we wouldn't expect price to go any higher than that. All right, I'm gonna put on the daily premium discount as well, just so you guys can see that too. Okay, so we know the EQ is roughly around there. Okay, so now we have a strong swing structure, and we can look to catch those 4 hour high lows, right, and trade with the pro trend. Now let's just bring this forward a little bit, right? So that would be the fractal low, because that candle failed to break the prior candle's high, and then we can look at what happens here. Okay, so now we have a bearish 4 hour change of character. So what does that signal? Well, that signals potentially we're going to start to get that pullback on the 4 hour chart, right? And then we can look to catch that high low to then play that a little bit higher. Now we're going to introduce another time frame here. Or just before we do that, I'm just going to mark out the 4 hour week swing high here. Okay. And then let's just jump down to the M15. Okay, so it's annoying that hasn't. I'm just going to quickly go back a sec just to make this appear on the minutes. So when we go down to the M15, what can we see here? Well, if we look at the swing structure, okay, we can see we had quite an impulsive leg up, then we had a swing pullback, then we made that swing higher high, and now we're coming down to shift bearish, right? We just about closed below there. So if you were just looking at the M15 on its own and you didn't trade any other time frame, you go, right, we've shifted bearish now. I want to, trade these lower highs and then just keep selling for as long as possible. But we understand what? We understand the high time phase we were in. Again, daily chart, where are we? I've had that impulsive breaker structure to the downside. We're expecting that swing pullback. We've had a bullish daily change of character, okay, which we know is a 4 hour swing trend shifting bullish, and we're looking to play that swing pullback, okay? So if we look at the 4 hour chart, the 4 hour chart has shifted bullish, okay? We've had that 4 hour breaker structure. So what do we expect after a 4 hour breaker structure? We expect a 4 hour swing pullback, okay? And then we want to try and catch that high low to then target at least as high, but potentially a bit higher. We want to play that deeper swing pullback, okay? So we know the 4 hours bullish, but the 4 hours pulling back. So if we look at the M15 and we understand that, well, then we know why did the M15 most likely shift bearish? Well, it most likely shifted bearish, just zoom out a little bit so you can see the 4 hour structure at the same time. It most likely shifted bearish just to facilitate that 4 hour swing pullback, right? In towards that 4 hour strong low, down into the discount of the 4 hour range, okay? So do you see now how that really helps us to understand what is going on and why, and then how to manage our expectations of how far price is likely to move, okay? Because if I just get rid of this for a minute and then draw off our M15 structure, this is our M15 break here. Okay, so that's when we had a bullish breaker structure to the upside, and then we had our bearish breaker structure to the downside, okay? So now this becomes a strong M15 high, okay? But let me just draw on first. Okay, so you can have another template there. Appreciate it's in the same place as the 4 hour structure. So you see that's a 4 hour week high, but it's a strong M15 high, okay? So what we can look to do is we can look to try and capture that swing lower high on the M15 to do what? To trade the next leg to the downside down into the 4 hour discount, okay? So we can look to follow the M15 structure, but we know that the deeper we get down into the 4 hour discount, that increases the probability that the 4 hour higher low is going to form and price is going to want to continue to the upside, okay? So when we're trading counter 4 hour trend, so if we're shorting, right, we're trading against the 4 hour bullish trend, okay? Because the 4 hour is bullish, we know it broke structure over here. So if we're trying to short here, this is pro M15 trend, but it's against the 4 hour trend. And that's okay, we can do it, but we just have to understand why we're trading it and what's the objective of price action. Well, the objective of price action is to facilitate the 4 hour pullback, okay? So if we short here, that's cool. We might want to be aggressive with our targets. Let's say we target here, price comes down, it pulls back again. Maybe we try and trade this here, okay, fine. But as soon as we start to get, especially down into the discount of the 4 hour leg, right? We know at any point that 4 hour high low can be in place. So one, we can start to look for longs, maybe just wait for a bullish M15 chock and we can get in long here and then we try and target that high. But also if price comes up, this high could hold, this M15 high, but we know that it's lower probability now because it's likely that 4 hour high low could be in place and price could be ready to move to the upside, okay? So when you're trading against the 4 hour trend in this instance, the best time to do it is up here because this is the start of the 4 hour pullback, okay? Whereas if you're trying to do it down here, this could play out. This could totally play out and you might want to trade it. But you have to understand that this shorting from here is a lot lower probability than shorting from here. And it's all because you understand the higher time frames, because you understand now that most likely what's happened is we've had the 4 hour higher high, we've pulled back to form the 4 hour higher low, and now price is more likely than not a guarantee, but more likely than not ready to go to the upside. So if that's the case, what will happen? Well, this M15 will then shift bullish, and then we can look to trade that to the upside there, okay? So when you can really get your head around that, that will really help you to not be on the wrong side of the market, and also to not, you could get in a beautiful trade here, like short, and you could be like trying to target this low here. But that's when you have a poor understanding of multi-time frame analysis, and that's where a lot of traders are getting caught out. Whereas if you have a good understanding, you can maybe be a bit more aggressive in getting along here against the M15 trend, because you're willing to try and anticipate that it is going to shift bullish. And also you may not want to short here because you realize, well, it's lower probability now. And if you are short from up here, you may realize, okay, well, I want to take my profits down here. Okay, so you see how it really just gives you so many more dimensions to your trading, simply just by understanding that bigger time frame picture. Now, for some of you, this might seem quite simple, especially if you have some prior experience and you know multi-time frame analysis, and also because this is quite a clean price action example. But sometimes price action can get quite complex, it can get quite range bound, and that's where really nailing these concepts first will help you, okay? So like we know, the M15 shifted bearish, and now we're playing the 4 hour swing pullback phase, okay? So we know we want to be a little bit more aggressive with our shorts if we're going to do it. Now, if you want to get really advanced, what do we have? Well, we have that break of structures to downside. So what do we expect after an M15 break of structure? We expect an M15 swing pullback, right? So what do we have? Well, we have that bullish change of character. You see how that inside bar failed to break the previous candle's low. So that becomes our fractal high. You see that? Price pulls back, moves to the downside, and then we get our bullish change of character. Okay, now I won't go into supply and demand just yet, but some of you know we'll have a demand zone here. We've had a bullish change of character. So now you could look to play that M15 swing pullback, right? Into what? Into the premium of that M15 leg. Okay, so you see this is the fractal nature of the markets. And it all comes back to, well, let's just go through this and I'll go through the kind of all three timeframes again so we can keep getting it in the forefront of our mind. But now if we're looking for longs, you understand all you're looking to play is that M15 pullback. So just be a quick move, right? So you could get long in here and then price moves to the upside. And then we get an internal breaker structure, right? That's your M15 IBOS, excuse me, to the upside, okay? I'll just mark this one as well. There was your initial M15 change of character, all right, to give us your bullish chalk. Okay, now you've got a bit more convincing price action, a bit more, clear structure. So that would be your IBOS, okay? So now that's your M15 internal low. And then again, you can look for longs from within here to play that pullback, but you probably don't want to push it too far because the EQ is quite near. So price pulls back. Let's see, into that strong internal low, right? So again, got that strong structure, price comes into it, and then we get another internal breaker structure to the upside, right? So that could be another place you could potentially look for counter M15 trend longs, right? But as we start to, see, have we broken it yet? As we start to get higher, we have to understand now that playing longs could potentially be, yeah, there we get the break, could now potentially be lower probability. Why? Well, because the M15 is bearish. This is, as you can see, a strong M15 swing high. Why is it strong? Well, it's strong because it broke the low. Now let's say we got long in here because we're playing the swing pullback again. Maybe we got long in here. I'm going to be pretty aggressive with my targets and probably take profits at these highs. Why? Because I'm expecting that swing lower high to form and continue to the downside, right? That's the expectation. That price is going to want to pull down into the 4 hour discount. So the M15, we just played the M15 swing pullback. We played for some quick, say, intraday longs. Again, you don't have to trade this, but it's just managing your expectations, right? You don't want to be buying here and necessarily targeting up here because the M15 is now bearish, okay? So now price is coming into the premium of the M15 range, into that strong high. So now we can start to look for potential bearish signals of structure shifting. So then we can look to potentially look for shorts, right? So do we get a break of structure here to the upside? We now have another internal break here, okay? So let's see, is it gonna, because you can look to get short straight away, right? As some of you will know, there's supply zones over here. You can short straight away. Some of you may want to look for more confirmation, and you may want to see what? You may want to see this internal structure. I know I'm being really pedantic here, but I want to go over it and over it so it really becomes clear. But the internal structure shifts bullish to facilitate the M15 swing pullback, okay? Now we're coming into supply zones over here. Appreciate some of you may not know what that is just yet at this stage in the course, and that's fine. But essentially we can look to short from with here straight away. And other times you may want to wait for a bit more confidence, and you may want to wait for the internal structure to shift bearish, because when that happens, we have more confirmation. Then you have a strong internal high that took out the low, and now we can trade from this strong high, and we'd expect that internal structure to stay bearish until it takes out the weak M15 swing low, right? And why is it a weak swing low? Because it didn't break the high. And that's literally how we do that. You guys should be familiar with that, right? From the 3 types of structure, but now we're overlaying it with multi-time frame analysis. So now what happens, we move along and then we make another high there, okay? Just about break and close above there. So you can have your another internal breaker structure. Okay, so now this would become your internal low. And as you will probably see, right, the fractal structure is very near to that as well, which would be the low of the inside bar. Okay, so they pretty much line up perfectly in that case, but that inside bar was the last candle to break the previous candle's high, so that's technically your fractal structure as well. So they're basically both in the same place, so I wouldn't even bother to mark out the chock in that instance. Okay, and now we have, we close below, we have the chock, and we have the bearish IBOS, okay? So now the M15 internal structure is realigned with the M15 swing structure. They're both bearish, okay? We've pulled back to the premium. So now what do we expect? Now we expect that internal ranges to stay bearish until it takes out that swing low. Okay, so now that gives us trading opportunities, right, to look to short from within here and then target that low. Okay, so let's see how that plays out. Okay, we come into there and we move to the downside. Now, in this instance, okay, you can see the internal structure, whoops. The internal structure stayed bearish, right? Had that internal lower low, lower high. We could look to short from there where you have a lot of confirmation, right? That's a great trade, and lower low. But some of you may have noticed that we did actually have a bullish change of character because price came down, pulled back, and then came down, and then we had a bullish chock here. Okay, and this is where structure, remember, change of character, fractal structure, it's the most aggressive type of structure. And you will see those breaks happen in a lot of instances. So sometimes, if you're looking to short, that will be a negative confidence against your trade, right? Because the fractal structure had to shift bullish simply to come up into your level. So that's not ideal, but sometimes that will happen. And sometimes this is where you have to understand, okay, at this point, the fractal structure is bullish, but you want to short through that, okay? Because sometimes it just has to shift bullish to come back up to your level, okay? I did just want to point that out there. But overall, hopefully you guys can see the trade idea here, right? We're bearish, we've shifted bullish to facilitate that pullback. We then came up right into the premium, up into the extreme. We had a strong move to the downside. The internal structure then shifted bearish, and then we can look to trade short from within here and target this low, okay? And then we can follow that internal structure there to the downside. So let's just play this forward a little bit and try and speed things up. Okay, a bit messy, but this is what happens, right? When you're trading counter trend, price action can get quite choppy like this, and that's just the nature of it, okay? When you're trading pro trend, it gets a lot more impulsive. So let's mark out this M15 low. Do we have a break yet? Not quite yet, just a sweep of that low. Let's see, and then eventually we get a break and closure below there, okay? So you can see that internal structure, lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high, then it just chopped around from within there, eventually got that internal lower low, didn't quite get the boss, pulled up again, and then we eventually got the break, okay? So let's kind of talk through that again. Well, I won't go on daily chart, we'll go on there in a minute, but essentially remember, right, the 4-hour chart shifted bullish to do what? It shifted bullish to facilitate the daily pullback, right? So the 4-hour shifted bullish, we're then looking for price to pull back on the 4-hour chart, that 4-hour swing pullback, to then catch that high low to the upside. The M15 shifted bearish, right? So when we get that M15 break of structure, that's a good signal that the 4-hour is pulling back. But then within that, we can also trade that. We can trade the M15 pullback, right? So we know we've got a swing lower low, and we can look to trade that long. We initially got the bullish change of character, quite aggressive, but that could have been your first potential long. Then you get an internal breaker structure there. Okay, now we have a bit more confirmation. That could be another long from within here. Okay, now we're getting a bit higher into the EQ, so I would say longs are getting a lower probability because now we're in the premium of this leg, and there's an increased probability that that swing lower high could form. But you can wait for a bit more confirmation, and you can wait for the internal structure to shift bearish. So then it's realigned itself with the swing structure. And now what do we expect? Now we expect these strong internal highs to hold, right? If they break the low, that's a strong high, to be respected until this week's swing low is broken, right? Which is what happens. And eventually it goes, okay? So that's how you can trade that from within there. So you see how there's multiple trading opportunities. Despite whether the 4-hour is bullish or bearish or what the daily is doing, you can still trade all of these moves, but it's about, is this going to be a quick move? Like, what am I expecting? Okay, this is a long because price is broken structure to the upside. Okay, fine. But do you have the deeper understanding of what's going on here across multiple time frames? That's where a lot of people don't have that, and they can get in long here and they can think, oh, the 4-hour is bullish, I'm getting in long after a chock and I'm trying to aim up here, and then they give their profits away, or things like that, or they keep trying to buy right up here and then they take losses because they're not understanding you're buying after a strong high has been mitigated, right? Okay, I think you guys get the idea with that. So now we've kind of played around with the M15. We really want to be concentrating mainly on trying to capture that next pro 4-hour trend move, right? Because that's going to be the big move we want to get with the high risk to reward trade. So as price is coming nearer this EQ, of course we know price doesn't have to tap it, but we want to be like on the ball and looking for where that 4-hour high low may form, right? So as we come into this level, there's a nice demand zone here. All right, I won't talk about it for now, just focus on structure. Nice big momentum to the upside. Okay, excuse me. And we get that, you know, arguably you could say that's internal structure, but it's definitely a fractal structure breaks the upside. We get that bullish chalk, and then you can look for longs from within here, right? So at this point, if you did that, you would technically be buying against the M15 swing trend, okay? So you're trading counter M15 because the M15 is bearish, but you are trading pro 4-hour chart. So this becomes a new high, right, as well, the M15 high, because that broke the low. Okay, so at this point, you can look to get long. You're trading against the M15 swing trend, but you are buying with the 4-hour trend, right? Because again, remember, show you the 4-hour trend is bullish. And we're trying to capture this high low, right, to target that high. That's what we're trying to do here. So when you're trading, you're not always going to have the time frames perfectly aligned. And sometimes you are going to have to trade, say, with the 4-hour, but against the M15, okay? So is an M15 chart going to be the signal that we're looking for confirmation that the 4-hour high low is in place? No, of course not. It's just an M15 change of character. So at this point, all that may be, that chart, is it literally could even just be to facilitate an internal pullback into this high to continue lower. That could totally happen. But because it's pro 4-hour trend and because it's in the 4-hour discount and we're coming to a good level, this is where you may want to be a little bit more aggressive and go, okay, I'm willing to take the risk and get in long here, anticipating that potentially we may be ready to go, okay? It may not be, but they're the types of things in which you can do, okay? And then we have a bit more of a big move to the upside, spike that high, don't quite close above it, and then we come in lower. And then what do? We come into the extreme, mitigate the level of demand, and then we start to push up high, okay? And then we get that bullish IBOS. Now, again, M15 is still bearish here in the swing structure, and this is still a strong high, but this is where people could only be looking at M15, not understanding the bigger picture, and they would be so attached to, as a poorly drawn line, but it's so attached to, like, say, this supply zone in here. This has to hold, like we've had a double bearish break of structure. It's the extreme, it's pro trend, and, you know, they maybe don't use a stop loss, they risk a lot or whatever. Like, they're so blinded to looking at why the M15 shifted bearish, that potentially they don't see that maybe this won't be a high probability trade. Now, that's not to say that you can't take trades here. Of course you can, but you just have to understand that it may be lower probability because it's likely that 4-hour high low may be in place and we may now be ready to shift bullish, right? So let's see what happens when we do eventually shift bullish right here on the M15. Okay, and now again, you've got even more confirmation to now look for longs because you've got the M15 is now bullish, aligned with the 4-hour chart, and you want to target that 4-hour high. Let's play this forward. And there we go. And we break structures to the upside. Okay. Right. So remember, kind of want to go this over again. What are we trying to do here? Daily chart shifted bearish, right? So we're looking to play that daily swing pullback, potentially up to the EQ. The 4-hour chart then shifted bullish over here, right? So then we wanted to try and capture that high low. But within that, we can trade even more of the move. We can look to play the 4-hour swing pullback. So what did we do? We waited for the M15 to shift bearish. Now, in this instance, you will see that 4-hour fractal low, that 4-hour bearish chalk, what was that? That 4-hour chalk was an M15 boss, right? The 4-hour fractal structure, in this case, it's not always, but in this case, it was the M15 swing structure. So do you know what I mean? That's what I mean. Where initially, when we only looked at one time frame, the whole way initially through the course, but you were looking at 3 types of structure that allowed you to do multi-time frame analysis without ever having to look at other time frames, okay? But now we are doing that, so it's even more powerful. So we had that 4-hour bearish change of character to play that pullback. But what did we do? We then tapped into the EQ, so down into the discount of this 4-hour leg, where we know there's an increased probability that 4-hour high low may form. So in this instance, then we'd be looking at the M15. It's very, very aggressive. I mean, aggressive is always relative, but basically trying to capture a 4-hour swing higher low with just an M15 change of character, that is aggressive, okay? Because we know, what does change of character signal? Change of character just signals the start and end of internal pullbacks, okay? So ideally what we would have wanted to see is like a clear internal break of structure. I mean, arguably, you maybe could have called that internal structure. It's not great. But yeah, but in this instance, you may want to have, there's other confidence we can look at for as well, liquidity and supply and demand, which we'll get into. But I just want to talk from a point of market structure. Yes, M15 shock is not the best signal that a 4-hour high low is in place. But if you can put more and more confidence together, 4-hour discount, it's the start of a new trend, supply and demand, which you'll get into, then perhaps this is where you go, okay, we've had a lot of momentum, session timing, et cetera, and this can be a trade that you may want to take, especially as we kind of spiked that high and starting to show signs that potentially we're starting to make that move, okay? Especially then when you get that IBOS there, right? And then you can look to try and capture this higher low. Then the M15 does shift bullish, okay? And then we can look to try and capture this higher low, and then we're off, okay? But yeah, at that whole time as well, remember, we played to the 4-hour swing pullback initially by looking to play here. So, we played the 4-hour pullback, we captured the 4-hour high low, we played the swing pullback here on the M15, do you know what I mean? And then we played this movement here. Like there's always you can make money. You don't have to trade all of it. You may want to be very conservative and only trade the pro trend things, and that's absolutely fine. But you see how now you can have an amazing read on price action just using even just a couple of time frames. You don't even need the daily in this instance, just the M15 on the 4-hour chart. Looking at internal structure, looking at fractal structure, and looking at swing structure. And yeah, it just times together really nicely. So, look at the 4-hour chart now. So what do we now have? We have a 4-hour breaker structure. So where is our swing low? It's the lowest point that broke that high. So we know it's here. Okay, so we can move our strong low to there. And again, what can we do? We can look to capture the higher low. So price falls back. Do we tap into the discount? Let's see. Okay, I'm just going to go a little bit quicker now because I appreciate it's a bit long video. So we've tapped into the discount. So now there's an increased probability that that swing high low could be in place. Let's see what happens. Do we take out the high? Not quite, become a little bit lower. But remember, we are still bullish until this low goes. Let's see what happens. And eventually we get that next breaker structure to the upside. Okay. So now again, what can we do? We can look to follow this strong structure. But as we're always saying, if you only look at the 4-hour chart and you don't understand the bigger picture, then you could think, okay, this trend is going to continue for a while. But if you look at multi-time frame analysis, and you look at the daily chart and you understand the bigger picture, we're soon approaching the EQ. So we have to be on the ball that potentially that daily lower high may now be ready, right, to form. And we may be now ready to target the week daily low, okay? So the 4-hour chart may not stay bullish for that long, okay? But you can keep following it until it doesn't. So in this instance, ended up switching bearish, okay? So now we have that. I'm just going to move this up here. That now becomes a strong high because it took out that low. There's your 4-hour boss. Okay, so now when you have that, what is that? That's a very, very good sign. It's not a guarantee, but a very strong sign. Now we've had that pullback to not quite EQ. This is a good point of where we don't need to. We now shifted bearish. So now the 4-hour swing structure is realigned with the daily swing structure. They are both now bearish, and now we'd expect those highs not to be breached until we take out that low and potentially beyond, right? So just play this forward a little bit. Let's just see what happens, chop around and so on and so forth. And then eventually we get that breaker structure, okay? So yeah, and you can see as well that, what was that 4-hour? Remember initially back here where we had the daily bullish chalk over here? Can you remember, whoops, did not mean to do that. Sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit here. That 4-hour bullish change of character was a 4-hour swing breaker structure, okay? Over here, we had the bullish daily change of character where the daily fractal structure shifted bullish. And what was that? That was the daily, sorry, that was the 4-hour swing breaker structure. And then remember when the 4-hour shifted bearish here, what did we get? We got the bearish daily change of character, right? And then to the downside. So you can see how, that fractal structure on one time frame, i.e. the daily fractal structure, that bearish chalk happened to be, it's not always going to be this case, but it happened to be the 4-hour swing structure. And likewise on the 4-hour chart, when we had the 4-hour bearish change of character over here, what was that? That was the M15 shifting bearish on the swing structure. So fractal structure on one time frame will be likely swing structure on a lower time frame. Swing structure on this time frame will be fractal structure on the higher time frame, right? But yeah, I don't think there's really too much else I want to add at this point. Now you can get, as complex as you want with the structure and label on everything and look at tons and tons of time frames. But for now, like I said, I'd kind of try and, you don't need to do any more than 3 time frames. You can even be pretty powerful with 2, but like the daily chart, the 4-hour chart, and the M15, get very comfortable with them. Initially, just focus on mapping your swing structure. That would be my main advice. And then if you feel a bit more comfortable, bring in internal structure and changes of character. and things like that. But hopefully you should already be very, very comfortable with the 3 types of structure on their own in one time frame. If you're not, then I would recommend going back to those lessons and really practicing with that first. If you're starting to feel like you got the grasp of that, then bring in multi-time frame analysis, but initially just focus on the multi-time frame swing structure. And then you can get a bit more clever with bringing in your internals and infractals and all that good jazz, right? So I'll leave that there. Hopefully you took some value from that. Watch this again and again and again. Practice, practice, practice. You are not going to get this initially, most of you, right? You may be able to understand it, you may get the rules, but there are going to be instances where price action is not always so nice. It can get a bit complex. Sometimes a strong structure can keep getting disrespected and the market can do your head in a little bit like that, but that's just the nature of the game, right? So yeah, practice, practice, practice. And 3 months time, when you feel like you got comfortable with this, I guarantee you'll feel like, as your knowledge progresses, you'll learn more and more. And then you'll just confuse yourself and you need to come back to the basics and come back to here. Like once a quarter, go over this stuff again, nail down the basics. And yeah, I'll leave that there before I ramble any longer. And yeah, just keep practicing.